of the things that makes Pixar movies so amazing is all of the tiny little details that can be found in them. It's really those small details that make the different worlds come alive. It's also the reason that there's so many theories. While the most famous theory is the Pixar Theory, there are a lot of smaller theories surrounding the different characters, especially the villains. And while Pixar has never confirmed any of the fan theories, each of these are so detailed that they might actually be true. Take, for example, Sid, the first ever Pixar villain. There's no doubt that he terrorizes every toy that he comes across. If he's not blowing them up, he's making them one of his mutant toys. But is Sid really that bad? Sure, he's big and intimidating looking, but fans have pointed out that we're only seeing him through the eyes of the toys. In reality, Sid's just another kid. A kid who doesn't know that toys can move or talk or feel, and one that's probably traumatized by what happens to him at the end of the movie. At the end of the day, Sid's probably less of an evil, cold-hearted toy destroyer and more of a lonely kid looking for an outlet. After all, he wasn't invited to Andy's birthday party. His sister doesn't seem to care or want to play with him, and he's always shown to be alone. He's just looking for something to do. But the definitive proof that Sid isn't actually all that bad has to be Scud. Unlike his sister, Sid never locks Scud out of the house or calls him stupid. Instead, we see Scud waiting at the door for Sid to come home. The two clearly care for each other, and can somebody who loves their dog really be that bad a person? Of course, there was one character in Toy Story that had the potential to be a true villain. And fans think that Lotso was actually introduced in Toy Story 3 just to show us just what Woody could have become. After all, the two are a lot alike. Both toys are painted to be the leaders of their groups and the favorite of their child. Not to mention, they both got really angry at the prospect of being replaced. While Lotso forced Big Baby and Chuckles to leave when he saw that his child had replaced him, Woody became angry at Buzz just for being placed on Andy's bed. And sure, Woody and Buzz became friends by the end of the movie, but that doesn't mean he wasn't capable of doing something terrible. Even all of Andy's other toys think that he's capable of doing something. Mr. Potato Man was suspicious of Woody from the start, and all the other toys were quick to believe he'd done something to Buzz when they saw just his hand. Even Slinky Dog. If this theory is true, then Toy Story 3 can be seen as a dark reflection of Woody and what could have happened had he not managed to befriend Buzz. Well, maybe Woody wouldn't have found himself tied to a truck, but he definitely could have become cynical and controlling, just like Lotso did. Of course, not every theory completely changes how we see the villains. Take, for example, Anton Ego in Ratatouille. While the food critic was nowhere near as bad as Chef Skinner, his presence loomed over the characters and represented a threat. A bad word for him and they'd lose one of their stars. Luckily, Remy's dish was enough to warm his heart as he remembered the ratatouille that his mother would make him. But who was this mother that made such great food? Well, some fans have come up with a theory thanks to their eagle-eyed vision. While it looks slightly different, the home we see in the flashback is the exact same one from the start of the movie. The old lady that the mice were living with is Anton's mother. Not only is the outside of the house the exact same, but the little fireplace, pipes, and the stove that we see when Remy and Emile are trying to escape the lady are all the exact same as the ones from Ego's flashback. That would also explain why Remy's dish reminded Anton so much of his mother's, because it was. After all, Remy learned all about cooking from her cookbook, her cooking shows, and probably even from watching her working away at the stove. Although, thinking about it, that does sort of make him a bad food critic. I mean, if he only gives out good reviews to his mother's cooking, that's kind of biased. Although that's not the only time that a character's bias has really changed things. If this theory about Charles Muntz is true, some fans believe that Charles Muntz is actually a notorious liar instead of the great grand adventurer Carl and Ellie always saw him as. In this theory, the scientist deeming the bones as fake was just the final straw. And in a way, that makes sense. One mistake wouldn't be enough to completely destroy somebody's reputation, but a series of fakes? Yeah, that would do it. It would also explain why a group of scientists even felt the need to determine if the skeleton was real or not. Plus, Muntz doesn't do much to prove himself when Carl and Russell meet him. The spirit of adventure is filled filled with skeletons, which, if he did care about the field and not just the fame, he would have left them in the care of a museum that could properly take care of them. And he definitely wouldn't be willing to be throwing a sword around them. Honestly, no one who actually cared about uncovering history would be so careless with relics. Not to mention, the stories he tells Carl are clearly fake. As some keen viewers have pointed out, it would be impossible for Muntz to take out an Arsinotherium when the dinosaur has been extinct for millions of years. Besides, it's hard to see him as some great adventurer. No one who treats dogs like that could be a good person. I mean, look at how he treats Doug. The poor boy just wants friends and to play. But Muntz is more than willing to be rough with him just because he tried to help Carl, Russell, and Kevin. And that's not even considering how he treats the other dogs as servants. Look, he's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. He's a hot, steamy garbage bowl. But okay, Muntz isn't the worst Pixar villain. That title should probably go to Randall and Waternoose from Monsters, Inc. After all, the two have been kidnapping kids for at least 2 years. And sadly, if this theory is right, the one victim of their plot is poor little Boo. The theory centers around the fact that Boo always seems to know a little bit too much. Boo was dressed and out of her bed in the middle of the night when Sully peeks into her room, which doesn't make a lot of sense for a kid unless she was hiding from the monster she knew was coming. And sure, maybe she's used to being scared like other kids, but then why does she know how to get into Randall's secret lair? Boo didn't really have a reason to check out the tools on the walls, but for the first time, she leaves Kitty alone and goes to a bunch of tools. And then she just happens to hit the right tools to open the secret door?
Coincidence? I think not!
The timeline also matches up for Boo to be the kidnapped child. Roz and the CDA have been undercover at Monsters, Inc. for 2 years by the end of the movie, which means the experiment has been going on for longer than that. After all, they wouldn't have them all figured out the second they started experimenting. And while Boo's age is still unclear, Billy Crystal, Mike Wazowski's voice actor, called her a 3-year-old little creation. This means that her age perfectly matches up with when the experiment started. It may also explain why she can't speak very well. She's pretty limited to what she says, mainly sticking to kitty and screams. But a child her age should be able to say more than a couple words. If she'd been having her screams stolen by the machine for years, she may have had troubles learning to speak. After all, it's not like it doesn't have any effects when used. Poor fungus. Speaking of evil plots, we can't forget one of the biggest fan theories, that Syndrome had actually been working with the government. The government! It's made clear fairly quickly in The Incredibles that the government is still keeping an eye on supers. As soon as Bob throws his boss through the wall, arrangements have been made to keep everybody silent, and the family is even given a chance to relocate. Heck, there's a whole department dedicated to the cleanup of super accidents. But what if they knew exactly where the supers had gone? Dealing with the countless cover-ups had gotten pricey. Rick Dicker says so himself at the hospital. It's getting expensive. Now, Rick himself probably wasn't involved with any of this. He actually seems to care about Bob and the Parr family, but others very well could be. And it's not like the government didn't know about Syndrome. During his monologue, Syndrome admits that he got rich by selling weapons to different countries. It wouldn't make sense for them to be monitoring a bunch of supers, but not a man with extreme wealth and weapons. This is what led fans to believe that the two could be working together. Maybe Syndrome is paying the government off, or maybe they just decided to turn a blind eye for the sake of their wallets. Either way, it's pretty clear there's something fishy about all of this. And there we have it. Pixar may never confirm these theories, but they make way too much sense to not be true. They all fit a little bit too well to not at least be partly true, and they added a little bit of new depth to some of our old favorites, don't you think?